She was the widow bride no man wanted, until a Lakota war chief whispered, "Could you carry my name?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. In the summer of 1867, in a small town nestled at the edge of the vast Dakota Plains, there lived a widow named Clara Whitmore. At 23, she had once dreamed of a life filled with love and happiness, but now, she was nothing more than a shadow of her former self. Her once thriving family farm was now quiet, barren, and weighed down by the loss of her husband, Samuel, who had passed away the previous winter. Samuel had been a kind and hard-working man, but illness had taken him too soon, leaving Clara to face a harsh and unforgiving world alone. After his death, Clara found herself shunned by the townsfolk. The whispers about her began almost immediately. She's a widow now, but no man would want a woman who can't bring a dowry to the table. The cruelty of her situation became clear as her father's debts, his gambling, and his mistakes were now to be paid for with her future. Her only hope lay in marrying Jake, Blackjack, Morrison, the notorious outlaw whose reputation for violence stretched across the entire Dakota Territory. Clara had never met Morrison, but she knew enough to understand that marrying him meant becoming a prisoner in her own life. Still, the pressure from her father and the surrounding community was unbearable. Clara refused to accept this fate. That is, until one fateful evening, as she paced in her room, dreading the inevitable. The cold wind howled outside her cabin, and a storm was fast approaching. She was trapped in a life she didn't choose, facing a forced marriage to a man she feared, with no way out. As she gazed out of the window at the darkening sky, a figure appeared from the edge of the woods. A lone rider, a man draped in the traditional clothing of the Lakota people, rode toward her home. She froze, her heart racing. The man dismounted, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the dimming landscape. As he drew closer, Clara could see the glint of his fierce eyes and the war paint on his face. His presence felt like a storm in itself, powerful, unyielding. The man stopped just outside her door. "You don't belong here, widow," he said, his voice low and strong, filled with authority. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "I've seen what is coming for you," he continued, his eyes scanning the distant horizon. "Jake Morrison is a man who kills without mercy, a man who takes what he wants without question. But you, Clara Whitmore, are not meant to be his bride." She could hardly believe what she was hearing. This stranger, this Lakota warrior, seemed to know more about her fate than anyone else. "You are not alone," he said, his voice steady. "I can offer you a way out, if you are willing to take it." Clara felt a strange mixture of fear and hope well up inside her. For the first time in months, she saw a glimmer of possibility. He continued, "I am Chief Thunderbear of the Lakota people. You have a choice, Clara. Stay here and face the man who will break you, or come with me and become part of a world where you are not just a possession. You will carry my name, and in return, I will protect you from the storm that is coming." Clara stood in silence for a moment, torn between the life she had known and the possibility of a future she could not yet fully understand. But one thing was clear. She could not go back to the life she had, not now. The choice before her was as dangerous as it was life-changing. She stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "I will go with you." And just like that, her fate was sealed. Clara had made a choice that would forever alter her life, one that would lead her into the heart of the Lakota people, into a world of honor, protection, and a love she never expected. The wind howled fiercely as Clara followed Chief Thunderbear deeper into the wilderness, her heart pounding in her chest. The world she had known, the small town, the forced marriage, the shame of being abandoned by her own people, seemed to fade with every step she took into the vast Dakota Plains. She was walking into the unknown, but with each step, the fear that had gripped her slowly began to dissipate, replaced by something new. A sense of purpose. Chief Thunderbear led the way, his tall, commanding figure cutting through the wind as if he was one with the earth. His horse, a sturdy and proud steed, moved with grace across the rugged terrain. Clara struggled to keep up on foot, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth with each step, but she refused to fall behind. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. As they reached the edge of a dense forest, Thunderbear paused, turning to look at her with those piercing eyes. "You are safe now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The storm that threatens you is not just a man, Clara. It is the weight of the world you were born into, the rules that governed your life until now. But that life is behind you. You are free to choose your future." Clara nodded slowly, unsure of what the future held, but feeling a deep, unexplainable sense of gratitude toward this man who had come to her aid when no one else would. As they made their way into a hidden valley, Clara felt the weight of the wilderness around her. The mountains stood tall and silent, the air crisp and clean. For the first time in years, she felt as if she could breathe deeply without the constant pressure of judgment and fear pressing down on her chest. The path led them to a small camp nestled at the foot of a towering rock formation. Several Lakota warriors were gathered around a fire, their faces painted in traditional patterns. They looked up as Thunderbear and Clara approached, their expressions unreadable. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the night air. Thunderbear dismounted, and Clara followed suit, her legs aching from the long journey. One of the warriors stood and approached Clara, his gaze assessing. He was tall, with a quiet intensity in his eyes. "This is the woman you spoke of?" he asked, his voice rough yet respectful. Thunderbear nodded, his posture proud. "Yes, she is under my protection now. She is not just a widow or a woman to be traded. She carries the strength of her choices." The warrior studied Clara for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "We will honor your choice, Thunderbear. She is welcome here." Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been afraid that the Lakota people would see her as an outsider, an intruder in their world, but instead, they accepted her presence without question. As the firelight flickered in the darkness, Thunderbear spoke again, his voice low but filled with meaning. "Clara Whitmore, you are no longer bound by the past. From this moment on, you will be known as Akecheta, the one who chooses her own path." Clara's heart fluttered at the sound of her new name. Akecheta. It felt foreign and powerful, like a rebirth. She had chosen her fate, and in doing so, she had found a new identity. The other warriors began to gather around the fire, and Thunderbear motioned for Clara to sit beside him. As the night wore on, they shared stories, and Clara listened intently, learning about the Lakota way of life. They spoke of honor, respect, and the importance of family. She had never known a world like this, one where strength and kindness coexisted, where people were valued not for their wealth or status, but for the depth of their character. The fire flickered, and Clara felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the days passed, Clara, now known as Akecheta, began to settle into her new life among the Lakota people. The camp, nestled in the shadow of the towering mountains, became her home. Each morning, she woke to the sounds of the warriors preparing for the day, their horses snorting as they were saddled, the crackling of the fire as it was stoked for the morning meal. Akecheta had never experienced such peace in her life. Gone were the worries of being a widow with no future. Gone were the whispers of the town that once cast her aside. Here, in the embrace of the Lakota, she felt something new, respect. Thunderbear, who had become both a protector and a guide, taught her the ways of his people. He spoke of honor, bravery, and the sacred bond between all living things. He had given her a new name, a new life, and a new purpose. Akecheta's days were filled with learning. She helped with the horses, cleaning and feeding them, learning to understand their moods and needs. She learned the art of tracking and the importance of silence in the wild. She worked alongside the women of the tribe, who taught her to weave baskets and prepare food, but also to hunt, to survive in the harshest of conditions. Though Akecheta's body grew stronger with each passing day, it was her heart that felt the greatest change. The people of the camp began to trust her, and in return, she began to trust them. Thunderbear remained a constant presence, watching over her with the quiet strength that seemed to flow from him like the river that ran through the valley. Yet, despite the peace she had found, there were moments of uncertainty. Akecheta would sometimes look to the distant horizon, remembering the life she had left behind, the small town, her father's debts, the forced marriage. The world of Jake Morrison, which had once seemed like an inescapable nightmare, now felt distant. She had made her choice, but she was still haunted by the fear that her past might one day catch up with her. One evening, as the sun began to set and the campfire crackled to life, Thunder Bear called her over. The warriors had gathered around the fire, and Akecheta knew that something important was about to happen. As she sat beside him, the chief spoke. "Akecheta," he said, his voice low and steady. "The time has come for you to prove your place in this world, to show the strength of your spirit." Akecheta looked at him, confused. "How can I prove myself? I have no more to give," she said, the weight of her past still heavy on her shoulders. Thunder Bear's eyes softened. "It is not your past that defines you, Akecheta, but the choices you make now. The tribe will face a challenge, and it is you who will decide whether we succeed." The camp fell silent as the warriors watched them. Thunder Bear's words had more weight than Akecheta could comprehend. "What challenge do you speak of?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The chief's gaze hardened, and he stood up, motioning for her to follow. He led her to the edge of the camp, where a group of young warriors was preparing for a hunt. The trail they were following had led them to a dangerous area, an area that belonged to a rival tribe. Thunder Bear had known this for days, but had kept it hidden from the others. "There are risks involved," Thunder Bear said, looking at Akecheta. "But we cannot ignore the need for food. The choice is yours. You can lead the hunt and prove your worth to the tribe, or you can remain behind." Akecheta felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. She had been given the power to make a choice, to lead. The fear that had always held her back seemed to dissolve in that moment. She could no longer afford to be passive, to wait for life to choose for her. She had to step forward, as her new name suggested. "I will lead the hunt," she said, her voice firm, a surge of strength coursing through her veins. Thunder Bear nodded, his approval unspoken. "Then it is time to see if the spirit of the Lakota runs in your blood as well as your heart." The following days were filled with preparation. Akecheta practiced her aim with a bow and arrow, learning to track with greater precision. She learned how to read the signs of nature, to understand the wind, the movement of the animals, and the subtle shifts in the earth that could lead her to her prey. The time had come, and as Akecheta led the warriors through the treacherous terrain, she felt a new confidence in herself. She was not just a widow, not just a woman with a broken past. She was a leader, a protector, and a part of something much larger than herself. As they approached the territory of the rival tribe, the air grew thick with tension. Akecheta knew this would be the moment that would define her future. Would she succeed and prove herself to the Lakota, or would her past come back to haunt her? As the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over the plains, Akecheta's heart pounded in her chest. She was ready. The days leading up to the hunt were filled with preparation and anticipation. Akecheta spent hours with the warriors, learning to move silently through the thick underbrush, the land beneath her feet as alive as the air she breathed. Her senses heightened, each crackling twig or rustling leaf sharp in her ears. She was learning to understand the wild as the Lakota did, not as an enemy to be tamed, but as a partner to respect. Thunder Bear's words echoed in her mind. "The spirit of the Lakota runs in your blood as well as your heart." She had never fully understood what that meant until now. The night before the hunt, a deep silence fell over the camp. The usual chatter of the warriors had quieted, replaced by an eerie calm. Akecheta stood near the edge of the firelight, watching the stars stretch across the vast sky. The night was cool, and the wind whispered through the trees. Her heart beat steadily, but beneath that calm exterior, there was a storm of emotions. She was leading this hunt. She, a widow with no more family to speak of, was now entrusted with the lives of these warriors. The weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. Was she truly ready? Did she have the strength to lead them to victory? As she looked toward the horizon, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Thunder Bear approaching, his figure tall and strong in the dim light. "You are ready," he said, his voice a calm anchor in the swirling thoughts that threatened to drown her. Akecheta nodded, though doubt still lingered in her heart. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the sky, the group set out. The trail was difficult, winding through dense forests and rugged terrain. Akecheta led the way, her instincts sharp as she guided the group toward the rival tribe's hunting grounds. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. The wind had shifted, and she knew that the rival tribe's warriors would be near. It was a dangerous territory to cross, but there was no turning back now. They had to succeed. Hours passed as they moved through the wilderness, every step a reminder of how much she had changed since arriving with Thunder Bear. She had been a woman of fear and uncertainty, now transformed into a leader with a purpose. The warriors followed her with a quiet respect, their trust in her growing with every passing moment. Finally, as the sun reached its peak in the sky, they arrived at a clearing where the rival tribe had been seen. Akecheta halted, signaling the group to be still. She crouched down, inspecting the ground. The trail was fresh. The animals had passed through here recently. She signaled the warriors to spread out, preparing for the hunt. They moved swiftly, the practiced motions of skilled hunters blending seamlessly into the environment. Akecheta's heart raced as she followed the lead of the warriors, her eyes scanning the ground for signs of movement. Then, just as she was about to signal the group to move forward, she heard a rustling behind her. She whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for the bough at her side. Standing just beyond the trees, watching her intently, was a lone warrior, one from the rival tribe. His eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, she felt the weight of her decision. She could lead them into a battle, but it would cost lives. But there was another way. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Slowly, she lowered her bow, signaling to the warriors to hold their position. The rival warrior took a cautious step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "You lead this hunt," he said, his voice low, but full of challenge. "What makes you think you can defeat us?" Akecheta stood tall, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. "I do not seek to defeat you," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I seek only to protect my people and my tribe. This land is not mine to claim, but I will fight for the future of my people, just as you fight for yours." The rival warrior studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the trees. The tension in the air lifted, but the weight of the encounter lingered in Akecheta's mind. She had shown strength, not by fighting, but by standing firm in her beliefs. She had chosen peace over conflict. It was the right choice, but it had not been easy. Akecheta returned to her warriors, her heart still racing from the encounter. Thunder Bear watched her closely, his gaze piercing as always. He said nothing, but there was pride in his eyes. "You did well, Akecheta," he said quietly. "Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we do not fight." The rest of the day was spent in quiet reflection. The rival tribe had retreated, and the hunt was abandoned. Akecheta's mind raced with what had happened, but she knew that she had made the right decision. She had led her people not by brute force, but by understanding and wisdom. As the camp settled for the night, Akecheta sat beside the fire, gazing at the stars once more. She had earned her place among the Lakota, but the true test was yet to come. The days that followed the hunt were filled with a sense of accomplishment, but Akecheta could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. She had led her people through one of the most difficult challenges they had faced in recent memory, yet the quiet weight of leadership pressed heavily on her shoulders. The Lakota people were a proud and resilient tribe, but the land they fought for, the land they had defended for centuries, was constantly threatened by outside forces. Thunder Bear had shown his trust in her, but Akecheta knew that trust came with expectations. One evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and the stars began to peek through the fading daylight, Akecheta stood by the campfire, watching the flames dance and crackle. The sounds of the warriors preparing for the night's rest surrounded her, but her mind was elsewhere. The events of the past week had left her with more questions than answers. Thunder Bear's words echoed in her mind. "You have proven your strength, Akecheta. But what will you do now?" The path ahead was unclear. She had chosen to leave behind her old life, but the new life she had embraced came with its own struggles and responsibilities. She was no longer just a widow or an outsider. She was part of the Lakota, bound by honor, duty, and a promise to protect her people. Yet, Akecheta felt a strange sense of isolation, even here in the midst of her newfound family. She was accepted, but there were still moments when she felt like an outsider in her own skin. As the fire burned low, Thunder Bear approached her, his presence calm and reassuring. "Akecheta," he said softly, his voice a steady presence against the stillness of the evening. "You have done well. But remember, a leader does not just protect the people. A leader must also understand them. To lead, you must walk alongside them, not ahead of them." Akecheta turned to face him, her eyes meeting his steady gaze. "I understand," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "But sometimes, I feel like I am not truly one of them. I've been accepted into the tribe, but I still carry the weight of my past. The fear that it will follow me, that it will always be a part of me." Thunder Bear nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The past is like a shadow, Akecheta. It is always with us, but it does not define us. The strength of the Lakota comes not from forgetting the past, but from learning from it. We honor those who have come before us, but we do not live in their shadows." Akecheta considered his words carefully. She had always felt burdened by her past, by the choices made for her and the life she had been forced to live. But perhaps Thunder Bear was right. She had the power to shape her own future. She had already made one choice that changed the course of her life, and now she had to decide what kind of leader she wanted to be. The next morning, Akecheta woke before dawn. The air was crisp, and the sun had yet to rise over the horizon. She stood by the edge of the camp, watching as the first light began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The world was still, the only sound the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the earth beneath her feet, grounding her. She was no longer just Akecheta, the widow who had fled her past. She was now a part of something greater, something that went beyond blood and name. She was part of the Lakota, a people who valued strength, courage, and honor above all else. The challenge ahead was not just about protecting her people from outside threats. It was about protecting the spirit of the Lakota, the traditions that had been passed down through generations. It was about leading with wisdom and compassion, not just strength. That morning, as the sun rose higher in the sky, Akecheta made a decision. She would no longer let fear hold her back. She would step into her role as a leader, not just for the Lakota, but for herself. She would walk alongside her people, learn from them, and lead with the strength and wisdom that had been instilled in her since the moment she arrived. Thunder Bear, who had watched her from a distance, approached her as the day began. "You are ready, Akecheta," he said, his voice full of pride. "The people will follow you, just as they have followed me. But remember, leadership is not about commanding others. It is about earning their respect and trust." Akecheta nodded, her heart filled with a sense of peace she had never known before. She was no longer just a widow, a woman running from her past. She was a leader, a protector, and a part of the Lakota people. As the day began, she knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. The shadow of her past would always be with her, but it no longer held the power to define her. She was Akecheta, a woman who had chosen her own path. As the days grew longer, Akecheta felt the weight of her decision settle deeper into her heart. She had chosen to stand as a leader among the Lakota, to embrace a life that was both empowering and filled with immense responsibility. Every action she took now was a reflection of that choice, and though she had begun to learn the ways of her people, there was still much more to understand. Thunder Bear's teachings guided her, but the true test of her leadership was approaching. One morning, as she stood beside the fire, preparing for the day, Thunder Bear called her over. His eyes, usually calm and steady, carried a sharpness that Akecheta had not seen before. "Akecheta," he said, "there is a matter that requires your attention. The tribe has received word of a band of settlers moving through our land. They bring with them cattle and supplies, but they also bring trouble. They have been encroaching on our territory, and their actions have angered our people. You must go and speak with them." Akecheta felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of dealing with settlers, people from the outside world she had once belonged to, filled her with unease. She knew the land was sacred to the Lakota, and any threat to that land would not be taken lightly. But this was her chance to prove herself, to show the tribe that she was capable of handling matters of leadership. She could not back down. "I will go," she replied, her voice steady, despite the nervousness building inside her. Thunder Bear nodded approvingly, his eyes filled with quiet pride. "I will send a few of the warriors with you," he said. But remember, Akecheta, this is not a battle you seek. You must speak with them, find out what they want, and resolve this peacefully if you can. But if they threaten our land, you will need to act quickly. The journey to the settlers' camp was long, and the heat of the sun beat down relentlessly on Akecheta and the warriors who rode beside her. The land they traveled through was barren, vast, and unforgiving. As they approached the camp, Akecheta could see the settlers' tents and wagons scattered across the landscape. The sight stirred something deep within her, a mixture of recognition and bitterness. These people, like her once, had come seeking a new life, but their presence now felt like an intrusion. She could hear the sounds of cattle lowing and men shouting orders as they worked to settle into the land. Akecheta's heart raced. She had no idea what kind of reception they would get. Would the settlers listen to her? Or would they see her as just another threat? As she dismounted and approached the settlers' camp, the men looked up, their faces wary, their hands resting near their weapons. Akecheta stepped forward, her posture firm but not threatening. She had learned much from the Lakota about how to stand with both strength and grace. "I am Akecheta," she said, her voice carrying across the camp. "I come on behalf of the Lakota people. We have heard that you have come to our land. What is it that you seek?" The settlers exchanged uneasy glances before one man stepped forward. He was older, with a grizzled face and a weather-beaten hat that had clearly seen better days. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "We are simply looking for a place to settle. The land further east is overrun, and we've been told that this land is open for homesteading. We intend to raise cattle and make a living here." Akecheta regarded him carefully, weighing his words. She knew that settlers often claimed land that wasn't theirs, but she also knew that not all of them came with violence in their hearts. Still, the Lakota could not afford to lose any more land. "This land is sacred to my people," she said, her voice low and firm. "It has been passed down through generations, and we will not give it up without a fight. But I come to you not as a warrior, but as a leader. I ask you to leave, peacefully, and find another place to settle. There is no place for you here." The settler looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his voice softer now. "We came here looking for a better life, but we will respect your wishes. We'll pack up and move on. There's no need for fighting." Akecheta felt a surge of relief wash over her. She had feared that this would turn into something far worse. But her words had been heard. The settlers gathered their belongings and began to pack up their camp. Akecheta stood watching them, her heart heavy with the realization that this peaceful resolution had come at a cost. She had stood firm in her beliefs, but she could not forget that the settlers had come with hopes of building something new, just as she had once hoped for a future of her own. As the settlers moved off, Akecheta felt Thunderbear's presence behind her. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You did well," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You showed wisdom in the face of conflict. The Lakota will remember this." Akecheta nodded, but her thoughts were far from the praise. She had made a choice, one that had averted violence, but she knew that the future of the Lakota and their land was never truly secure. There would always be more settlers, more threats, and more challenges to face. But for the first time, Akecheta felt ready to face whatever came next. She had earned her place, and she would protect this land, no matter the cost. The days after the settlers left felt different. The land, once filled with tension and uncertainty, seemed to breathe again. Akecheta had made her first real choice as a leader, and it had brought peace, at least for the time being. The warriors respected her more than ever, and even the elders began to nod approvingly when she passed by. But Akecheta knew that peace was fragile, like the early morning mist that vanished with the rising sun. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. The Lakota people had always fought for their land, their way of life, and Akecheta understood that she was now part of that legacy. The land they called home was vast and unforgiving, and while she had succeeded in avoiding conflict with the settlers, she knew there would be other threats, other challenges. As the weeks passed, Thunderbear called Akecheta to his side one evening. The fire crackled between them, the flickering light casting shadows across his face. "Akecheta," he said, his voice serious. "We must prepare. The plains are growing more dangerous. There are rumors of another group moving into our territory. This time, they are not settlers. They are traders, but they do not come with good intentions. They have made deals with other tribes, and they are looking to take what is ours. Akecheta's heart sank at the mention of yet another threat. She had hoped that the encounter with the settlers would be the last, but deep down, she knew the fight for their land would never truly end. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Thunderbear looked at her with the same quiet strength that had always been his. "We need to meet them. We must show them that the Lakota are not to be taken lightly. But this time, it will not be just about protecting our land. It will be about our future. We need to make a stand." Akecheta nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had learned much about leadership in the time she had spent with the Lakota, but this was different. This wasn't just a matter of defense. This was a battle for their future, for the very survival of their people. The following days were spent preparing for the confrontation. Akecheta stood with the warriors, learning the strategies of war that had been passed down through generations. They practiced their moves with precision, their arrows striking targets with deadly accuracy. But it wasn't just physical preparation. Akecheta spent long hours in conversation with the elders, learning about the traders and the deals they had made with rival tribes. These traders were not only after goods, they were after power. They sought to control the land, to claim it as their own, and they would stop at nothing to achieve their goal. As the day of the confrontation approached, Akecheta felt a quiet determination settle in her chest. She had chosen this path, the path of a leader. She had faced the fear of the settlers and overcome it. Now, she would face an even greater challenge, one that required not just strength but wisdom and courage. The night before the meeting, she sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. She thought of her old life, the life she had left behind, the life where she was nothing more than a woman with no future. Now, she was Akecheta, leader of the Lakota, a protector of her people. She had chosen this life, and she would not let it slip away. As the first light of dawn touched the land, Akecheta stood tall, ready. The traders had made camp near the edge of the territory, and Akecheta and the warriors rode out to meet them. The wind was fierce, blowing dust across the plains as they approached the camp. The traders, a mix of men from various tribes and distant lands, eyed them warily as they rode up. Akecheta dismounted, her posture firm. She could see the leader of the traders, a man dressed in fine clothes and carrying the air of one who was accustomed to having his way. He looked her up and down, his eyes narrowing. "You are the leader of these people?" he asked, his voice full of arrogance. Akecheta met his gaze, unflinching. "I am," she said, her voice steady. "And I protect the land that belongs to the Lakota." The trader smirked, clearly unimpressed. "This land is not yours to keep. It is valuable, and we intend to take what we want. You and your people are in our way." The challenge was clear, but Akecheta did not flinch. She had already made her decision. "You will not take this land," she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet power. "We will defend it with everything we have. You will not have it, not without a fight." The trader laughed, but the sound was empty, lacking the confidence he had worn moments before. Akecheta's warriors stood firm. Behind her, their faces resolute. This time, there would be no negotiation, no compromise. The traders would leave, or they would face the strength of the Lakota people. The tension in the air was thick, the sound of the wind the only thing that seemed to move. The trader's expression faltered as he realized the resolve of the Lakota. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered. Akecheta stepped forward, her stance unwavering. "We do not seek violence, but we will protect our land. Leave now, and there will be no bloodshed. Stay, and you will know what it means to face the Lakota." The trader hesitated, the power of her words sinking in. After a long pause, he gave a sharp nod to his men. Without another word, they turned and began to pack up their camp. Akecheta stood watching them leave, her heart still racing. She had not drawn a single weapon, yet her words had been enough. This was her victory, the first of many to come. As the traders disappeared over the horizon, Akecheta knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt certain of one thing: she was ready. The days following the traders' departure were filled with a quiet sense of victory. Akecheta stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the plains, the wind whispering through the grass. The tribe had been spared from yet another threat, but Akecheta knew that this moment of peace would not last forever. The land was vast and wild, But the world beyond the Lakota's borders was growing ever more dangerous. Yet, despite this, she felt a sense of strength she had never known before. The experience with the settlers, and now the traders, had shown her that leadership was not just about fighting. It was about wisdom, about standing firm when necessary, and making choices that would protect the future. As the sun began to set one evening, casting long shadows over the camp, Thunder Bear approached Akecheta. She could feel his presence before she even turned to face him. "Akecheta," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of wisdom. "The time has come for you to make a choice." Akecheta's heart skipped a beat. The last few months had been a whirlwind of decisions, but this felt different. She turned to him, meeting his gaze with determination. "What choice do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady. Thunder Bear's eyes softened, but there was something in them, a quiet understanding that only he could offer. "You have proven yourself in many ways, but there is still one thing left for you to do. You must claim your place among the people, not just as a leader, but as one of them. You must choose your mate, Akecheta. The time has come for you to bond with one who will walk beside you, sharing in the burdens and the triumphs that lie ahead." The words struck her like a thunderclap. She had never given much thought to marriage since arriving with the Lakota. The weight of survival, of proving herself as a leader, had consumed her. She had focused on the tribe, on ensuring their safety, their future. But now, she was faced with the possibility of a bond, a partnership, one that would forever change the course of her life. Thunder Bear watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You have the strength to lead, Akecheta," he continued. "But to lead fully, you must also know love. The two are not so different. Leadership is a bond, a commitment to the people. So too is a union with a mate. You must find one who will understand your heart, as well as your mind." Akecheta stood in silence, contemplating his words. She had always feared that she was too broken, too scarred by her past, to truly connect with another person. The thought of opening herself up, of sharing her life with someone else, seemed foreign. She had chosen this life, the life of a leader, the life of a protector. But to choose a mate, how could she, when her heart had been shattered long ago? But as the words lingered in the air, something inside her stirred. She had come so far, faced so many challenges, and each time she had risen to the occasion. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the next step. Perhaps love, too, was something she could choose. The next few days passed in quiet contemplation. Akecheta spent time with the women of the tribe, talking with them about their lives, their bonds with their husbands, their families. She had learned so much from them, but this was different. This was something deeply personal, something that touched the very core of her being. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting its golden light over the camp, she saw him. Koda, a warrior of the tribe, strong and silent, with a presence that was both calming and fierce. Akecheta had seen him around the camp, had watched the way he carried himself, confident, but never boastful. There was a quiet strength in him, something she admired deeply. It was not just his strength, but his unwavering loyalty to the Lakota. He had been with the tribe through the toughest of battles, had stood by their side without question. And as she watched him that evening, something inside her shifted. She realized that the choice she had been avoiding was before her. Koda was the one. He was the one who would walk beside her, sharing not just in the triumphs, but in the struggles, the battles, the quiet moments of peace. The next day, Akecheta approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never done this before, but there was no turning back now. Koda looked at her with those steady eyes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Akecheta took a deep breath and said, "Koda, I have chosen you." The words felt strange on her lips, but also right. She saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by a calm understanding. "I would be honored," he said simply, his voice low but filled with sincerity. In that moment, Akecheta knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one that would change everything. She was no longer just a leader. She was a woman who had found love, who had found her equal, her partner. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, whatever they might be. As the days turned into weeks, Akecheta and Koda worked together, learning from each other, growing stronger as individuals and as partners. They became a team, their bond solidifying with each passing day. And as the seasons changed, so too did the land. But one thing remained constant: Akecheta's resolve to protect her people, and the strength of the love she now shared with Koda. As the seasons shifted and the days grew longer, Akecheta and Koda's bond deepened, and the Lakota people began to look at her not just as a leader, but as the heart of their future. Her union with Koda had been an anchor, steadying her in ways she hadn't imagined. Together, they faced the challenges of their world, their partnership now a symbol of unity, strength, and the promise of a future built side by side. But peace, as Akecheta had come to understand, was fleeting, especially in a world where the land itself was a battleground. One evening, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Akecheta stood by the fire, the orange glow casting shadows across her face. When Thunderbear approached, his expression grim. "Akecheta," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of leadership. "There are whispers of a great war. The tribes to the east are gathering. They seek to claim the lands that we have protected for generations. They have already begun their raids on the outskirts of our territory." Akecheta felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known this day would come, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it all too real. The Lakota were not just a people of the land. They were a people of the fight. Their survival had always depended on their ability to defend what was theirs. "How soon will they arrive?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. Thunderbear's eyes met hers with unflinching resolve. "They march now. We must prepare." Akecheta nodded, her thoughts racing. The people she had sworn to protect now stood on the brink of war, and it was up to her to guide them through the storm. She looked toward Koda, who had been quietly standing by, sensing the shift in the air. His presence was a grounding force, and she felt his eyes on her, ready to support her, just as he always had. "We will need every warrior, every woman, and every child ready to stand and fight. This will not be an easy battle, but we must defend our land, our way of life," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The warriors practiced relentlessly, their arrows hitting their marks with precision, their spears sharpened to deadly points. The women and children worked together to gather supplies, food, and water, preparing to move swiftly if necessary. Akecheta's role was clear. She had to lead the people, not just in battle but in spirit. She had to be the fire that fueled their courage. As the day of the confrontation drew nearer, Akecheta found herself standing at the edge of the camp, looking out over the vast plains. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of purple and pink. Koda joined her, his presence a comfort she hadn't realized she needed until now. "We will face them," he said softly, his voice strong, yet filled with a quiet understanding. "But no matter what happens, we stand together." Akecheta turned to him, meeting his gaze. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. "Together," she echoed. They had come this far together, and they would face whatever lay ahead with the same unwavering bond. The day of the battle arrived, and the Lakota warriors, led by Akecheta and Koda, took their positions. The enemy was large, their numbers overwhelming, but Akecheta had the advantage of knowing the land better than any of them. As the first warriors from the opposing tribes crossed into Lakota territory, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The Lakota launched their attack with precision, arrows flying through the air, striking their targets with deadly force. The battle was brutal, a clash of wills and strength, but Akecheta stood firm. She fought alongside her people, her bow drawn, her arrows finding their marks. She had never felt more alive, more certain of her place in the world. As the battle raged on, Thunderbear's voice rang out across the field. "Hold the line. We will not fall. The land is ours." His words fueled the Lakota warriors, pushing them to fight harder, to stand taller. Akecheta, with Koda by her side, continued to lead the charge, her heart beating in time with the rhythm of the battle. Hours passed, and the fighting began to subside. The enemy forces, though numerous, had underestimated the determination and spirit of the Lakota people. Slowly but surely, they began to retreat. The tide had turned. When the battle was finally over, the air was thick with smoke, and the ground was littered with the remnants of the fight. Akecheta stood amidst it all, her heart heavy but resolute. The Lakota had won, but the cost was high. Many lives had been lost, and the land would bear the scars of the battle for years to come. As she looked around at the faces of her people, she knew that the victory was not just hers, it was theirs. They had fought together, and together they had defended what was theirs. In the days that followed, as the tribe mourned their fallen and healed their wounds, Akecheta stood beside Koda, her partner, her equal, ready to face whatever came next. They had proven that no matter the odds, the Lakota would always rise, stronger and united. The land would remain theirs, and with it, their legacy would endure. In the aftermath of the battle, the Lakota tribe began the long process of healing. The war cries that had filled the air now gave way to silence, broken only by the sounds of the warriors tending to the wounded and the mournful calls of the women as they honored the fallen. Akecheta stood beside Koda, her heart heavy but proud. The victory had come at a high cost, and the land was scarred by the violence. But the Lakota had held their ground. Their strength had been tested, and they had prevailed. As the days passed, Akecheta found herself reflecting on the war, the choices she had made, and the life she now led. The woman who had once feared the weight of leadership, the widow with no future, had transformed into the heart of the Lakota tribe, a symbol of resilience and strength. Yet, as much as the battle had tested her, it had also given her a deeper understanding of her people and their unbreakable bond to the land. She had chosen to fight not for power, but for the future of the Lakota, and in doing so, she had proven herself worthy of the title she carried. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, Akecheta and Koda stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the vast plains. The air was still, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "We have won," Koda said softly, his voice a mix of pride and weariness. "But the cost, the land is changed, and so are we." Akecheta nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The land will heal, just as we will," she said, her voice steady. "But the scars will remain, and so will the memories. This battle has shown me what we are capable of, but it has also shown me the fragility of our world. We must protect what we have, and we must continue to fight for it, not with violence, but with wisdom and unity." Koda turned to her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You are more than just a leader, Akecheta. You are the spirit of the Lakota. You have shown us the strength of the heart, the strength that comes not from weapons, but from love and commitment to each other and the land." Akecheta felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. The bond they shared had deepened over the months, their partnership a reflection of the unity they both sought for their people. She had never imagined that she would find love, not in the way that most people did. But with Koda, she had found something deeper, a partnership built on trust, respect, and a shared vision for the future. "We have come a long way," she said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. We must continue to move forward, to honor those who fought for us and protect those who will come after us." The following days were filled with rebuilding, both physically and emotionally. The warriors who had fought bravely returned to their families, tending to their wounds and sharing their stories of the battle. The women of the tribe worked tirelessly to repair the damage done to the camp, while also tending to the needs of the community. Akecheta and Koda, now united not just in love but in purpose, led the efforts to heal and strengthen the Lakota. Akecheta took her place among the elders, not just as a leader of warriors, but as a keeper of wisdom. She shared the lessons she had learned in battle, how to fight with honor, how to make hard choices, and how to hold on to what mattered most, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But she also spoke of the importance of peace, of building alliances, and of protecting the land not just with weapons, but with the strength of their hearts and minds. Over time, the Lakota tribe began to flourish once again. The scars of the battle healed, and the land, though changed, grew rich with new life. The young ones, who had once known only fear and loss, now grew up learning the stories of their people, the stories of resilience and bravery that would continue to inspire generations to come. Akecheta and Koda watched the tribe thrive, their bond as strong as the land itself. They had built something lasting together, not just for themselves, but for the Lakota people. They had faced the storm and emerged stronger, not just as leaders, but as a family. And as the years passed, they continued to lead with wisdom, love, and an unwavering commitment to the Lakota way of life. Their legacy would live on, etched into the very fabric of the land they had fought so hard to protect. The months that followed were filled with both peace and the quiet hum of growth. Akecheta and Koda's leadership had woven new strength into the fabric of the Lakota tribe. Together, they had established a way of life that was stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. The winds of change had swept across the plains, leaving in their wake a people who had not only survived, but who had thrived. The Lakota were rebuilding, not just their homes, but their spirits. Akecheta stood alongside Koda one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land they had fought so fiercely to protect. The camp was alive with the sounds of children playing and elders telling stories around the fire. The warriors, now at peace, spent their days training the young ones, passing on the wisdom and skills that had kept the Lakota strong for generations. Yet, despite the tranquility, Akecheta could feel a sense of unease creeping in. There was always the possibility that a new threat could emerge, that the fragile peace could be shattered. As the moon rose high in the sky, Akecheta and Koda sat quietly by the fire, the warmth of the flames reflecting in their eyes. "The world beyond these plains is changing," Akecheta said softly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "We have fought to protect this land, but the forces that seek to take it from us will not stop. We must be ready." Koda's gaze was steady, unwavering, as he turned to her. "We will always be ready," he said. "But perhaps it is time we look beyond just protecting what we have. Perhaps we need to think about what we can give, what we can offer the world, rather than just defend it." Akecheta paused, considering his words. She had spent so much of her life focused on survival, on the fight to hold on to what they had, that she had never truly thought about what it would mean to offer something to the world. "What do you mean?" she asked. Koda's eyes softened, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "The Lakota have always been a people of strength," he said. "But we are also a people of peace. We have a way of life that can teach others how to live in harmony with the land, with each other. Perhaps it is time we share that with the world, instead of only defending it." Akecheta's heart stirred at his words. She had always believed in the Lakota way, but she had never considered that it might be something worth sharing with others beyond their borders. Could they offer their wisdom, their strength, to those who needed it most? The idea was daunting, but it also filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she was missing. The following days were filled with quiet contemplation. Akecheta spoke with the elders, asking for their guidance. They, too, had seen the changing world around them, and they too had begun to wonder if the time had come for the Lakota to reach out beyond their borders. "The world is shifting," said one elder, his voice heavy with years of knowledge. "But we must be careful. We must offer our way of life, not force it. There are those who will seek to destroy it, but there are others who will understand the strength we possess." Akecheta listened intently, weighing the elder's words. She understood that the Lakota way of life was not something to be taken lightly. It was sacred, and sharing it with others would require great care and wisdom. Yet, there was something stirring within her, a desire to not just preserve, but to share, to teach the world what it meant to live with respect for the land, to live in harmony with the earth and each other. She spoke with Koda, who supported the idea fully, his heart aligned with hers. "Let us offer our strength and wisdom to those who seek it," Akecheta said, her voice filled with resolve. "We will do so with respect, and we will do so with love. We will show the world that there is another way." And so, the Lakota began their journey toward a new chapter. They did not abandon their commitment to protect their land, but they also began to open their hearts to others. Akecheta and Koda, as leaders, traveled beyond their tribe, meeting with neighboring communities, sharing the teachings of the Lakota. They spoke of the importance of honoring the earth, of living with respect for all living things. They spoke of the need for unity, for peace, and for strength not through violence, but through understanding and compassion. Slowly, the seeds of their teachings began to take root. The Lakota shared their wisdom with those who were willing to listen, offering not just protection, but guidance. It was a new way of leading, one that embraced peace as much as it embraced strength. As the months passed, Akecheta felt the weight of leadership shift within her. No longer was she just a warrior, a defender of her people. She was a teacher, a guide, and with Koda by her side, she knew they were on the path towards something even greater. The Lakota had always been strong, but now they were showing the world that their strength came not only from their ability to fight, but from their ability to love, to teach, and to share. They had learned to protect what they had, but now they were learning how to offer it to others, to make the world a better place not just for themselves, but for all who would listen. Akecheta and Koda stood together, watching the sunset over the plains once again, knowing that the journey ahead would not be easy, but it was one they would walk together, as partners in leadership, as partners in life, and as the stewards of the land they had fought so hard to protect. As the seasons continued to change, Akecheta and Koda's vision for the future of the Lakota people began to take shape. They had not only fought to protect their land, but were now working to share the Lakota way of life with others. It was a delicate balance, honoring their traditions while opening their hearts to the world beyond their borders. But in doing so, they discovered that leadership was not just about strength in battle, but the strength to lead with compassion, wisdom, and the understanding that they were part of something far greater than themselves. One crisp morning, as Akecheta stood by the edge of the camp, watching the mist rise from the plains, she felt a stirring within her, a call to move forward, to push the Lakota people into a future that would keep their legacy alive for generations to come. It was a feeling that she could no longer ignore. Koda approached her, sensing her unrest. "You are deep in thought," he said, his voice gentle. Akecheta turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "The world outside our lands is changing," she said, her voice steady. "We have fought for our land, and we have protected it. But now, I feel the time has come for us to take a step further. We must unite with the other tribes, not just to protect our way of life, but to ensure it thrives. If we do not, we risk losing everything we have built." Koda nodded, his eyes reflecting the same resolve. "I agree. The time for individual strength has passed. If we are to continue living in harmony with the land, we must strengthen our bonds with those around us. It is the only way to ensure that the Lakota, and all the tribes, remain strong." Akecheta knew that what they were about to embark on would not be easy. There were old rivalries, old wounds, and old fears to overcome. The tribes had long been divided by past conflicts, and the idea of uniting them was a daunting task. But she had learned, over time, that strength came not just from fighting, but from understanding and forgiveness. The next few weeks were spent traveling from camp to camp, meeting with the leaders of the other tribes. Some were skeptical, their old grudges and fears holding them back, while others were open to the idea of unity. Akecheta and Koda spoke of the strength of the Lakota people, not in war, but in unity. They spoke of the land they all shared, of the need to protect it together, and the importance of teaching their children the ways of the earth, of living in harmony with it. Slowly, over time, the other tribes began to listen. The once divided people were coming together, understanding that their strength lay not in fighting each other, but in standing united against the outside forces that threatened their way of life. But even as alliances were forged, Akecheta felt the weight of the task on her shoulders. She had led her people through battle and hardship, but this was different. Uniting the tribes was a challenge unlike any she had ever faced. It required not just the strength of warriors, but the strength of hearts and minds. One evening, after a long day of talks, Akecheta and Koda sat together, looking out over the camp. The fire crackled softly between them, and the sound of the warriors speaking in low voices echoed in the distance. Akecheta felt the weight of her responsibilities more than ever. "What if we fail?" she asked, her voice a whisper in the night air. Koda looked at her, his expression soft but filled with unwavering confidence. "We won't fail," he said simply. "The Lakota have always known how to survive, and we have always known how to fight. But this is different. We are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for all of us. For our future." Akecheta felt his words settle in her heart. The path ahead would not be easy, but they had come too far to turn back now. And they were not alone. Together, with Koda by her side, she would lead her people, not just in battle, but toward a future of unity, peace, and strength. As the weeks passed, the first signs of true unity began to take shape. The tribes, once divided, now stood together, stronger than they had ever been before. They trained together, shared resources, and learned from one another. Their differences, once seen as barriers, were now seen as strengths, each tribe bringing something unique to the table. But even as they celebrated their newfound unity, Akecheta knew that the real test was still ahead. The outside world was still out there, and their enemies had not disappeared. But now, the Lakota people stood together as one. As the sun rose over the plains, casting a golden light across the land, Akecheta and Koda stood at the forefront of the united tribes, looking out at the horizon. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The Lakota would continue to fight, not just for their land, but for the future of all the tribes. The world was changing, but the strength of the Lakota people, united in purpose and heart, would endure. The years passed, and the Lakota people thrived in ways they had never thought possible. The unity between the tribes, forged through the leadership of Akecheta and Koda, became a powerful force that ensured their survival and prosperity. They were no longer just a group of warriors defending their land. They had become a symbol of strength, resilience, and peace. The alliances they had built with other tribes held strong, and their way of life was not just protected, but shared with others who had once been enemies. The land, though scarred by past battles, had begun to heal, and with it, the spirit of the Lakota people was stronger than ever before. Akecheta had led them through the darkness, but she had also shown them the light. She had taught them that the greatest strength came not from the weapons they wielded, but from the unity they shared, the respect they had for one another, and the love they held for the land. But the journey was far from over. Akecheta, now older and wiser, stood with Koda once more by the edge of the camp. The sun was setting over the plains, painting the sky with hues of red and gold. They had seen so much in their time together, and yet there was still so much more to be done. The world beyond their land was ever-changing, and the challenges that lay ahead would require even greater wisdom and courage. "We have come so far," Akecheta said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "But I feel there is more we must do." Koda turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same determination that had first drawn them together. "What do you see, Akecheta?" he asked, his voice steady. Akecheta gazed out at the vast expanse before them, the endless horizon stretching out like a promise. "I see a future where the Lakota are not just survivors, but teachers. A future where our way of life, our wisdom, our respect for the land, is shared with the world. We have proven that we can defend what is ours. Now, we must show the world how to live in harmony with the earth, just as we have always done." Koda nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "And we will do it together, just as we always have," he said, his voice firm and filled with unwavering loyalty. "We will carry this legacy forward, not just for ourselves, but for all who come after us." Akecheta smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her heart. Together, they had already achieved so much, and together, they would face whatever came next. Their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, Akecheta felt a deep sense of peace. The land was still theirs, and their future, though uncertain, was full of promise. The Lakota people had endured, and now they would thrive, united in their purpose, their strength, and their love for the earth. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, Akecheta and Koda stood together, hand in hand, watching the last rays of light fade into the night. They had built a legacy of strength, unity, and love. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, they knew that their story would be told for generations to come, a story of a people who fought not just to survive, but to live in harmony with the land, with each other, and with the world. In this captivating tale, the journey of a Lakota warrior and a widow unfolds, merging the strength and traditions of the Native American people with the challenges of survival in the wild frontier. The story is a powerful narrative of resilience, love, and leadership, offering a profound exploration of the emotional and physical battles that shape a person's destiny. As the Lakota tribe faces external threats and internal struggles, their unity becomes their greatest weapon, proving that survival is not just about the fight, but about living in harmony with the land and each other. This story is a perfect example of classic Western stories, showcasing the deep emotional connections that form between characters as they navigate the complexities of leadership, loyalty, and love. Each chapter reveals the strength of the human spirit, as Akecheta arises to lead her people, not just in battle but in peace, sharing the wisdom of the Lakota way of life. Through challenges and triumphs, the story delivers the essence of Western stories, where honor, courage, and respect for the earth drive the characters' actions. As Akecheta and Koda forge alliances, their partnership becomes a beacon of unity and strength, reflecting the true essence of what it means to protect one's land and people. This narrative is a vivid reflection of timeless Western stories, bringing forth the themes of community, family, and survival in a world that constantly tests the limits of its characters. The enduring legacy of the Lakota tribe is a testament to the power of unity, wisdom, and the deep connection to the land, making this story a remarkable addition to the tradition of Western stories that continue to inspire and captivate audiences everywhere.